Saving money isn't just a financial habit. The Bible treats it as a spiritual discipline. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through 7 biblical saving principles almost nobody applies, and number 7 is the one that changes everything. Most people do the opposite. They spend everything when things are good and then panic when things get tight. But the Bible teaches the exact reverse. In Genesis 41, Joseph saved during the 7 years of abundance so he could provide during the 7 years of famine. Think about the position Joseph was in. He had just been promoted to the second most powerful man in Egypt. He could have lived large, enjoyed the harvest, celebrated the good years like everyone around him was doing. Instead, he built storehouses. He set aside a portion of every single harvest year after year, while the rest of the nation consumed everything in sight. And when the famine came, the one nobody else saw coming, Joseph's preparation didn't just save his own household, it saved an entire nation and the surrounding nations who came to Egypt for grain. The lesson is clear. If you only save when you're desperate, it's already too late. Saving must happen while things are going well. That's what prepares you for the unexpected. God doesn't teach us to react, He teaches us to prepare. Preparation is spiritual wisdom. And when you look closely at Joseph's story, you realize something powerful. Saving wasn't just strategy, it was obedience to God's instruction. Joseph didn't save because he was afraid, he saved because he trusted that God's warning was real and his guidance was wise. Many people today pray for financial miracles but ignore the preparation God has already instructed. Miracles come, yes, but they are never meant to replace wisdom. Saving is not a lack of faith, it is acting on what God has revealed. And this isn't just an ancient story with no relevance today. Think about your own years of abundance, the tax refund, the bonus, the month where overtime finally paid off, the side hustle that brought in extra cash. Those moments are modern-day Egypt. They're not meant to be celebrated and consumed in a weekend. They're meant to be stored, because somewhere ahead of you, a famine season, a slow month, a job loss, an emergency is coming. It always does. The question isn't if, it's whether you'll be Joseph or whether you'll be everyone else in Egypt who ate well for 7 years and then suffered for the next 7. Ask yourself honestly, when your last good month came, the bonus, the raise, the unexpected gift, what did you do with it? Did you build a storehouse or did it disappear in a week? And if that question stung a little, good. Because Principle 2 is going to show you exactly why that happened, and it has nothing to do with how much you earn. Most people live at the edge, 100% of income spent, sometimes 110% or 120%. But Proverbs 21:20 says, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." The Bible calls it foolishness to consume everything you receive. God's design is simple: income, giving, saving, spending, not the other way around. Notice the order. Most people live it backwards. Income, spending, and if anything is left, maybe saving, maybe giving. There's almost never anything left. That's not an accident. That's a system designed to fail before it even starts. Margin is the space between what you earn and what you spend. It's the breathing room. Without margin, every unexpected expense becomes a crisis. A flat tire becomes a fight. A doctor's visit becomes a debt. A slow month at work becomes a panic attack. Margin creates peace. Lack of margin creates anxiety. A household with margin can absorb shock. A household without margin gets knocked over by the smallest gust of wind. Picture 2 families earning the exact same income. Family A spends every dollar that comes in. Nice car payment, eating out a few times a week, always treating themselves because they worked hard for it. Family B earns the same amount but lives slightly below their means on purpose. When the car breaks down, Family A reaches for a credit card and starts a debt spiral. Family B reaches for an envelope they already set aside. Same income, completely different outcome. The difference was never how much they made, it was the margin they built before the crisis ever showed up. But here's the question I get asked the most. I don't even know where to start. I have basically nothing to put aside. If that's you, Principle 3 is going to set you free, because it has nothing to do with how much you have. Proverbs 6 says, "Go to the ant, consider its ways, and be wise." Why the ant? Because it doesn't save in huge quantities.
It saves grain by grain, little by little, every day. No ant waits for a big harvest moment to start storing food. It begins immediately with whatever it can carry, and it never stops. This is one of the greatest biblical saving mysteries. Consistency beats intensity. $2 saved daily beats $100 saved once a month and forgotten the next. Saving is not about the amount, it's about the habit. The ant mentality creates growth. The "I'll start someday" mentality creates lack. And the truth is, most people underestimate the spiritual power of small, repeated obedience. God constantly uses small things to create big results. A mustard seed, 5 loaves, a small cloud in Elijah's story, a simple shepherd boy facing a giant. In the same way, your small savings are seeds God can multiply over time. What you call too little to matter, God calls a beginning. But He cannot increase what you refuse to start. Here's what the ant principle looks like in practice. It's not a dramatic gesture. It's a $5 transfer every Friday. It's rounding up purchases and letting the spare change land in a savings app automatically. It's setting aside one meal's worth of money instead of ordering delivery. None of these feel powerful in the moment, but stretch them across a year and you've built something that didn't exist before without ever feeling like you sacrificed anything big. That's the quiet mathematics of obedience. Small, repeated, almost invisible, until one day it isn't. Here's where most people actually trip, though. They start the habit, but they never connect it to anything real, and a habit with no destination dies fast. That's principle 4. Many people try to save, but they have no clear reason or goal. The Bible teaches intentionality. Proverbs 29:18 says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Saving without vision creates frustration. Saving with vision creates motivation. A savings account with no name and no goal almost always gets raided the moment temptation shows up. But a savings account with a purpose, this is for my family's emergency fortress, this is for the business God put in my heart, this is for my children's future, has a guardian standing over it. Purpose protects what discipline builds. You need clear categories: emergency savings, long-term investments, family stability, opportunities God will send, and future generosity. God blesses what is planned, not what is vague. There's a simple but powerful trick here. Name your accounts. Don't just have savings, have emergency fortress, have freedom fund, have kids future. When temptation whispers, just borrow from savings real quick, it's a lot harder to raid something with a name and a purpose than something generic sitting in an anonymous account. Vision doesn't just motivate you to start, it protects what you've already built from your own impulses later.
Quick favor before we keep going, if this is opening your eyes, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next teaching. I put real research and prayer into every one of these. And drop a comment with where you're watching from. I like knowing where this message is landing. Now, principle 5 is the one almost nobody talks about, and it's the reason some people save for years and still end up with nothing to show for it. Proverbs 27:23-24 tells us, "Be sure you know the condition of your flocks, for riches do not endure forever." Back then, savings were stored in flocks and grain, living, breathing assets that needed daily attention, protection from predators, and careful management. A flock left unguarded would be picked apart by wolves, disease, or thieves before its owner even noticed. Today, we save through banks, investments, emergency funds, and responsible financial tools, but the principle hasn't changed at all. Here's the principle. Saving without protection is not saving, it's hoping. Your savings must be accessible, protected, diversified, stable, and wisely managed. God does not teach us to be careless, He teaches us to be good stewards. If you've been saving money but have no idea where it actually sits, how protected it is, or whether it's losing value to inflation while you sleep, that's not biblical saving, that's biblical neglect wearing the costume of responsibility. Think of it this way. Keeping all your savings sitting in a checking account earning nothing is the modern equivalent of leaving your whole flock in one open field with no fence and no shepherd watching it overnight. It might survive for a while, but it's exposed, and exposed savings eventually get eaten by inflation, by impulse spending, by emergencies that aren't actually emergencies. Biblical stewardship means actively watching over what you've gathered, not just collecting it and hoping it stays safe on its own.
And that brings up a question a lot of Christians quietly struggle with, one that sounds spiritual but is actually keeping them broke. Some Christians avoid saving because they think, God will provide, I don't need to worry. But biblical saving is not fear, it is obedience. God provides, but He expects us to manage wisely what He provides. Provision is God's part, stewardship is ours. Think about it this way. God provided manna in the wilderness daily, yet He still instructed the Israelites on the Sabbath to gather double the day before, so they wouldn't have to gather on a day of rest. Even in a literal miracle of daily provision, God built in a principle of preparation. Faith is not the absence of preparation. Faith includes preparation. People who use trusting God as an excuse to avoid planning are not walking in greater faith, they're walking in greater avoidance and calling it spirituality. Remember the parable of the talents in Matthew 25. The servant who buried his money in the ground out of fear wasn't praised for his faith. He was rebuked for his laziness. Meanwhile, the servants who put their resources to work, who managed and multiplied what they were given, were called good and faithful. God's own parable draws a straight line between faithfulness and active stewardship. Doing nothing and calling it trust is exactly the mistake that parable warns against. Which brings us to the last principle. And out of everything we've covered today, this is the one that actually changes how it feels to manage money. The final and most powerful principle. Saving is not about money, it's about peace. Proverbs 21:5 promises good planning and hard work lead to prosperity. Saving gives you peace in emergencies, freedom to say no, confidence to make decisions, space to breathe, stability for your family, and the ability to be generous when God prompts you. You don't save to avoid fear, you save to live in peace. God wants His children prepared, stable, and confident. This is biblical wisdom in action. And once you experience even a small taste of that peace, the peace of knowing a surprise bill won't destroy your month, the peace of being able to give generously without feeling the pinch, the peace of sleeping without rehearsing worst-case scenarios, you'll never want to go back to living without margin again. Imagine getting a call about an unexpected expense, and instead of your stomach dropping, you simply say, I've got it. No panic, no scrambling, no shame. That moment isn't about money. It's about the peace God always wanted you to walk in, the peace that obedience in the small daily choices eventually produces. Saving is not a worldly habit dressed up with a Bible verse. It is a discipline God has been teaching His people since Genesis, through Joseph, through the ant, through the wisdom of Proverbs. These 7 principles are simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. They require you to do today what most people postpone. Prepare while things are good, create margin, save consistently, save with purpose, protect what you've gathered, stop hiding behind false faith, and finally, walk in the peace God always intended for you to have. If this video blessed you, don't just watch it and move on. Take one principle, just one, and apply it this week. Now, here's the honest part. Knowing these 7 principles is not the same as living them. You can know that Joseph saved during abundance and still spend every paycheck the day it lands. Knowledge without a system just becomes guilt, and guilt has never built an emergency fund. You're not behind because God forgot you. You're behind because faith without a system produces the same results as no faith at all. And nobody ever sat down and taught you the system. That's exactly the gap the Biblical Wealth Accelerator was built to close. It's not another generic budgeting course with a Bible verse slapped on top. It's a complete system, built directly on the principles we just walked through. The Joseph Fund strategy helps you build your emergency fortress in 3 levels, exactly the way Scripture prescribes. The 70-10-10-10 rule is the stewardship code that tells every dollar where to go before it arrives. The courtroom prayer is a spiritual warfare declaration to break generational patterns of poverty. And the 90-day habit tracker is a weekly routine to rewire how you think, spend, save, and give permanently. It's 20 focused pages, no fluff, no filler, built to be opened and activated the same day you download it. One viewer put it simply, Going to the Bible for financial answers ended up being far more helpful than anything the world had offered her. If your faith is real, your financials should be able to show it. The link is in the comments and in the description. It's called the Biblical Wealth Accelerator, and for less than the cost of one dinner out, it gives you a complete biblical system to start using today. God didn't create you to live exhausted, anxious, and one crisis away from collapse. He created you to live prepared, stable, and at peace. See you in the next video.